desert night is supposed to be silent. But silence has a sound. You only notice it when it's gone. I was driving east on a forgotten stretch of Mesa Road. Nothing but red sand and the kind of moon that makes you feel exposed. My friend Nate rode shotgun, half asleep when the headlights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. That's when we saw it. A shape, hunched and crooked, right in the beam. Not a coyote, not a man, something caught in between. It didn't move the way living things move. Its limbs were too long, joints bending backward like broken hinges. And those eyes, no reflection, just a faint green burn, as if the dark itself was staring back. Nate whispered, "Keep driving." I pressed the gas. The shape stepped off the road, slow, deliberate. And then it grinned. The radio spat a burst of static so loud it felt like a scream. No stations, just a single low voice. One word, my name. I slammed the dial off. The desert went silent again, but the air felt heavier, like something massive was crouched just outside the car. We didn't speak for miles. That should have been the end. But when I checked the rear view, the thing was keeping pace, far behind, a black knot against the silver sand. No headlights, no footprints, just there. And that's when I knew some roads don't belong to us. They belong to whatever walks after midnight. You feel that chill on your skin? That's the same quiet we felt. It starts as a story. It ends as a warning. Chunings should have burned the fear away. Sunlight does that, makes nightmares look small. But when we rolled into the gas station on the edge of Red Hollow, the world hadn't reset. It felt off, like the desert had kept its breath held overnight. Nate went inside for coffee. I circled the car, trying to convince myself we'd imagined everything. That's when I noticed the sand. No tire marks, no footprints, nothing. The road behind us was smooth, as if a windstorm had swept it clean. But the air was still. I crouched, searching for anything. A pebble, a line, a trace of our own arrival. Nothing but that pale, untouched dust. "Hey," Nate called, his voice tight. "Come look at this." I followed him to the station's side wall. In the shadow of the ice machine, 4 long scratches raked the metal, deep enough to catch the morning light. Each groove was perfectly parallel, like something with claws the size of carving knives had dragged a hand across it. The clerk inside, a weathered man with eyes like old glass, watched us from behind the counter. When I asked if he'd seen anyone, he shook his head once, slow. "Road's wrong," he said finally. "That's Skinwalker country. You drove it after dark?" I nodded. "Then you didn't drive it alone." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I tried to laugh it off. Probably some coyote. "Coyotes don't leave marks like that," he snapped, voice low but sharp. "They don't know your name." Nate's face went pale. We hadn't told anyone about the voice on the radio. The clerk leaned closer. "You tell anyone, they'll think you're drunk. But I'll tell you this. If it followed you here, it wants something. Don't give it your eyes. Don't speak its name. And whatever you do, don't turn around if you hear it behind you." The door creaked as we stepped back into the heat. The desert stretched endless and empty. But I could feel it. The sensation of being watched, of a shadow just outside the corner of sight. And there, beneath the bright sun, the silence returned. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that waits. We told ourselves we'd leave before sunset. We didn't. The car needed a radiator hose, something Nate swore he could fix once the hardware store opened. Noon slid into afternoon, and by the time we tightened the last clamp, the horizon was already bleeding orange. I kept glancing toward the scrub hills beyond the station. They looked ordinary in daylight, but every gust of wind carried a whisper, thin as a thread. At first it was only sound, a hiss like distant static. Then it began to shape itself. Jason, my name, clear as a friend calling from just out of sight. I spun, nothing but swirling grit. Nate caught my sleeve. "Don't answer," he said. His voice trembled. "That old man said it would try." I wanted to argue, to rationalize, but another breath of wind came, and this time it wasn't just my name. It was my mother's voice, soft, urgent. "Jason, it's me. Please, look at me." The ache of recognition nearly pulled me forward. That's when the clerk stepped out of the doorway, his shotgun resting casual across one arm. "Keep your eyes down," he warned. "It'll wear the faces you trust." The last sunlight died behind the hills. The sky turned the color of old bruises, and then we heard footsteps, slow, measured, on the gravel behind the pumps. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Nate whispered a prayer. I gripped the car door so hard my knuckles burned. The clerk raised his voice without turning. "You ain't welcome here. Go back to the dust." A low laugh answered, a sound that didn't belong to any throat I've ever known. It rattled through the air, half growl, half human, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Don't move," the clerk hissed. "If you see it, it sees you." For one long minute, the world held its breath. The footsteps stopped. The wind stilled. Only the neon hum of the gas sign flickered against the dark. Then, as sudden as it had started, the presence lifted. Like a weight sliding off the earth, the air warmed. The whispers faded into ordinary night. Nate exhaled first. Maybe it's gone. But the clerk shook his head. "It never goes. It waits." Somewhere out on Mesa Road, a single coyote howled, low, broken, and much too close. The clerk wouldn't let us stay. "Best chance you got is to keep moving," he said, loading shells with a steady hand. "But don't stop. Not for anything. You see a figure in the road. You drive through the shadow." His words chased us as we climbed into the car. The desert night had thickened. No stars, just a smear of copper moonlight that barely lit the asphalt. The engine coughed awake, and we rolled out of Red Hollow like fugitives. For the first mile, nothing. Just the low drone of tires and the thump of my heart. Then the radio clicked on. No static this time. A woman's voice sang, soft, lilting, an old lullaby my grandmother used to hum when I was a child. The melody cut straight through the steel of the car. Nate's hands tightened on the wheel. "Jason," the voice whispered between notes. "You forgot something." I reached for the dial. But before my fingers touched it, the volume surged. Every speaker vibrated, the song stretching, distorting into a chorus of my name. "Don't touch it," Nate barked. His knuckles were white, eyes fixed on the endless black ahead. Horn Freddy, flash of movement flickered in the headlights. Something stood in the center of the road, tall, lean, limbs bending wrong. It poor, swayed like a puppet, head cocked, as if it were listening to the lullaby with us. Its skin looked like shadow stitched over bone. Nate didn't slow. The figure didn't move until the bumper nearly grazed it. Then it stepped aside with a jerk, too quick for the human eye, vanishing into the dark scrub. The temperature inside the car plummeted. Breath steamed in the air. A voice came from the back seat. My voice. "Jason," it said. "Look at me." I froze. Nate stomped the accelerator. "Don't turn," he hissed. "It can't take what you don't give." The road stretched on forever, black ribbon under a moon that seemed to follow. Behind us, something ran, fast enough that we could feel the vibration in the tires, but silent as dust. I clenched my eyes shut and whispered every prayer I half remembered. The sound faded only when the first pale edge of dawn bled across the horizon. We didn't speak until the sun cleared the mesas. Even then, neither of us dared to look in the rearview mirror. Dawn should have felt like rescue, but the light was thin, washed out, as if the sun itself was wary of touching this part of the desert. We pulled into a roadside diner 100 miles from Red Hollow, our first stop since the night chase. The place smelled of burnt coffee and fryer oil, ordinary, comforting. Still, every creak of the door made me flinch. Inside, a waitress poured water with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You boys been out all night?" she asked. Nate only nodded, lips pressed tight. I excused myself to the restroom, desperate to splash away the grit and fear. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as I bent toward the sink and froze. On the side of my neck, just beneath the ear, a faint pattern had appeared. 4 thin lines, perfectly parallel, like the scratches we'd seen on the gas station wall. They weren't cuts, not exactly, more like bruises drawn from inside the skin. When I touched them, a cold tremor ran down my spine. The faucet hissed and sputtered. Then the mirror fogged, though no steam rose from the tap. Letters formed in the mist, crooked but unmistakable. "I see you." The words held for only a heartbeat before fading into ordinary glass. I staggered back. The door behind me creaked open without a sound. For a moment, I thought it was Nate, until I saw the shadow stretch across the tiles. Too tall, too thin. "Jason." The voice was a perfect copy of my own. Soft. Mocking. I bolted, slamming the door. The hallway was empty. The diner. Too quiet. Nate stood by the counter, eyes wide. "It talked to me," he whispered. "Your voice." We left cash on the table and drove without eating. The highway stretched ahead, but the landscape had changed. Every mile marker leaned inward, like they were watching. Even the sky felt closer, heavier. Hours later, when we finally reached the city, we parked in silence. Nate turned to me, pale as chalk. "Check your neck," he said. I did. The lines were gone. But when I caught my reflection in the side mirror, something blinked behind my own eyes, quick, inhuman, and smiling. Back in the city, life tried to resume its rhythm. Traffic lights blinked, buses hissed, and strangers hurried past with earbuds in. But normal felt like a costume. I couldn't keep on. Every night, the dreams came. At first they were small, roads stretching, endlessly under a copper moon, a faint humming at the edge of hearing. Then the shape began to appear, crooked, grinning, always just far enough that I couldn't make out its face. I'd wake to a room colder than it should be, the shadows trembling as if someone had just stepped out of sight. Nate stopped answering my texts after the third night. When I finally drove to his apartment, the hallway smelled of damp earth, though it hadn't rained in weeks. He opened the door only a crack. Dark circles bruised his eyes. "It's in my sleep," he whispered. "Sometimes it's not sleep." From inside his apartment came a faint radio hiss, like distant static. I strained to listen. Beneath it, a child's voice sang the same lullaby we'd heard on the desert road. Nate flinched. "Do you hear that?" I nodded. He shook his head violently. "No, you can't agree. If we both hear it, it's real." The lights in the hallway flickered. A low thud echoed from the stairwell. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps climbing toward us. "Close the door," I hissed. but Nate just stared past me, eyes widening. "Behind you." I turned before I could stop myself. The hallway was empty, except for a smear of dark sand across the floor tiles, leading straight to our feet. Something cold brushed my shoulder, the exact weight of a human hand. We slammed the door and backed into the apartment. The radio static swelled until the air vibrated. A voice, my own again, spoke from the corner where no speaker sat. "Jason," it said, "invite me in." The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through bone, a vibration that made my teeth ache. Nate clutched his head and shouted, "Don't answer!" I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to speak, to demand it leave. Instead, I stayed silent. The static faded to a heartbeat of silence, then a single whisper, "Soon." And just like that, the room went still. But the sand remained, glinting under the dim apartment light, as if the desert itself had followed us home. I kept telling myself, it can't cross into the open, but the thing that hunts you doesn't follow rules you invent. 2 days later, I forced myself outside. Noon sun blazed over the city, a shield of brightness. Crowds filled the weekend market. Vendors shouting, kids running, the smell of roasted peanuts mixing with car exhaust. Normal, noisy life. I thought I could disappear inside it. Then the air shifted. A pocket of cold slid between the stalls, so sharp it made people shiver and glance up, confused. I felt it immediately. The same heavy silence from Mesa Road. The crowd's chatter dimmed, as if someone had turned a dial. Across the square, a man stood perfectly still. Average height, ball cap pulled low. Nothing strange at first glance, until he moved. Each step bent a fraction wrong, knees bending backward for a heartbeat before snapping straight. Nobody else seemed to notice. He turned his head toward me, and my own face looked back. I stumbled into a fruit stand, knocking over a basket of oranges. The vendor cursed, but his voice sounded distant, muffled. The double of me smiled, a thin, sharp curve, and began walking directly through the crowd. People parted unconsciously, not even seeing him. I bolted. The city blurred. Side streets, traffic, horns. It all faded into a smear of sound. Every shop window I passed flashed reflections of that impossible grin. When I ducked into an alley, the world fell silent again. Footsteps followed, slow, certain. "Jason," my voice, perfect and steady, drifted from behind the dumpster. "You can stop running. You brought me here." I pressed against the brick, heart hammering. From the shadow stepped not one figure, but many, all me. 8, 9 copies, faces blank, eyes green as desert fire. They moved in jagged unison, heads tilting at the same angle. One stepped forward and whispered, "All roads end where they begin." I shut my eyes and forced a breath. "Don't speak. Don't give it your name." The clerk's warning burned in memory. A car horn exploded at the mouth of the alley. When I opened my eyes, the duplicates were gone. Only a scatter of black sand remained, swirling in the sudden gust. I staggered into daylight, but the crowd outside felt different. Faces I couldn't trust, voices that might be mine. Normal life had cracked. Day or night didn't matter anymore. I couldn't hide forever. Every reflection, every whisper proved that running only gave it more places to follow. On the 7th night, I drove back toward the desert, back to Mesa Road, where it began. The city lights thinned behind me until only the stars watched. The old gas station still stood, a dull outline against the moon. Its windows were dark. No sign of the clerk. just the endless hush of sand and wind. I stepped from the car. The air smelled of iron and rain, though the sky was dry. The silence pressed in, a weight heavier than sound. Jason. The voice came from everywhere at once, low, echoing, almost gentle. Shapes shifted along the dunes, first a coyote, then a tall man, then a dozen figures with my own face, each one smiling, each one tilting its head in perfect unison. "You've carried me far," they said together. "Now, give me the rest." I forced the name back behind my teeth. The clerk's warning burned in memory. Don't give it your eyes. Don't speak its name. But my own name was already theirs. The ground beneath me vibrated like a slow heartbeat. Sand poured upward, swirling around my legs. In the whirling grit, I caught flashes of every place it had touched. The diner, Nate's hallway, the market crowd, each moment replayed in the storm like shards of a broken mirror. A figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, its green eyes pulsing faintly. My exact face, but older, sharper, a version of me stripped of hesitation. "You've seen what waits between roads," it said. "Say the word, and you'll never fear again. Say it, and be whole." The wind screamed. My own voice, every tone I had ever used, rose with it, chanting the single word it wanted. I shut my eyes and whispered instead, "You don't get my breath." Silence. When I opened my eyes, the shapes had stilled. The tallest one grinned, wider than human, then began to crumble, grain by grain, until the desert swallowed everything. The wind eased. The night smelled only of dust. I turned back to the car, legs shaking, unsure if I had won or only delayed the inevitable. In the side mirror, my reflection stared back. Normal, almost, just before I drove away. It blinked once, out of sync with me. A slow, deliberate wink. And I knew. Some roads never let you leave. They only wait for you to return.